So it is my pleasure to welcome everyone in the room and watching along from their desks to NTIA's second multi-stakeholder process on software component transparency. We've got a lot to talk about. All of you have done a lot of work in the last 2 months, finding some common ground, identifying some points where we need to dig deeper, and that's the goal of today, is to review the work we've done and figure out where we're going to go. So just very briefly, the overview of the agenda. We're going to hear from all 4 working groups. Some of them, the goal of the presentation is to dive in deep and ask for your help. Others, they're going to say, hey, here's where we are, and if you want to help, that's great. So we're going to get an update, and then we're going to try to unpack some of the questions that have been identified along the way. Later on in the afternoon, after lunch, we're going to have a chance to say, hey, you know what we haven't talked about yet? We haven't talked about blank. And that will give all of us a chance to say, should this be something that we explicitly address, or for the time being, do we want to leave those subjects out of it? And then finally, we're going to revisit the logistics question. You're all here in sunny Washington, D.C. today. We thank you for that. But it's possible that the meeting that we're going to have in late February, maybe you want to have it somewhere other than Washington, D.C. I don't understand why. Washington's lovely in February. But if you have an idea of where it might be, then we'll have that chance to have that discussion as well. But before we kick off, we are very lucky today to have NTIA's Deputy Assistant Secretary, Dan Rinaldo, who's going to give us some broad overview remarks.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here today. I know it's a slow day in DC, nothing going on, slow news cycle. So I know this is at the top of everyone's agenda right now. And I believe we also have a hashtag. Yep.
Sure, we've been using hashtag SBOM.
Yeah. So, just perfect. I think we can definitely get this trending today, since it is such a slow news day. So please get out your phones and start tweeting the good words of Alan. First off, I want to say thank you for having me to the good Dr. Alan Friedman. I, too, was familiar with Alan's good work when I was on Capitol Hill and in the private sector, and so it's a great benefit to me to be able to learn alongside him in this process. So back in July, I was able to sit back and listen in on the session and hear all the great and diverse ideas that you all had. Well, I know many questions are still unanswered. I know you did come to a consensus on some. I know you all went back and were able to ponder those unanswered questions for the past couple of months, and you're ready to talk about them today. But from what I understand, you're in luck, and that these questions are going to be reignited, and you'll be once again challenged with these, as well as flag any additional new questions that come up throughout the day. But in all seriousness, we appreciate you being here and being part of the process. So, you know, Fred Upton, someone that I work closely with on Capitol Hill, likes to say, if you want to be there for the landing, you need to be there for the takeoff. So we appreciate that you are here and that your voice is being heard. So I'm going to keep this short, but I do want to talk about a quick anecdote about NTIA and our process. So we just completed our fiscal year, which is very exciting. And if any of you ever worked in the federal government, you're familiar with the review process that goes along with the end of the fiscal year. So this is, you know, my 7th month at NTIA. This is all new for me. But I learned a lot about the government's process as well. And all senior staff are graded on a certain set of criteria. Whether you're a NOAA scientist, a NIST engineer, or, you know, a policy PhD at NTIA, you're graded against the same set of criteria. So, well, if you're a NOAA scientist, it's a bit easier to quantify what you're doing if you're tracking hurricanes. Or if you're at NIST engineer and you're leading a team to develop standards, it's something that it's easier to talk about and write down on paper what you did for the year. But if you're a PhD policy person at NTIA, it's harder to quantify what you're doing in cyber policy space or name your big issue area. So, you know, David Ruddle, the administrator, and I were talking about, it's like, how can we best articulate? Our folks do such great work. How can we best put this down on a, 2 pages piece of paper, what we do? And what we came back to time and time again was the process itself. And that, when we come with a final idea and a solution, it's not just the solution, it's how we got there. That's really kind of the magic of it all. So it's you coming out today. It's Alan's effort to create a welcoming format that you feel comfortable speaking at, that invites the free flow of ideas. It's about civil society and academia wanting a good outcome. It's about the business community looking for a positive momentum forward on issues. The process works. You may not always agree with the outcome, but you came and you will be heard, and that will make a difference. So whether it be our cyber work on botnets that Megan has been working so hard on, our privacy outreach and RFC process, or the good work that Alan's doing here today with the multi-stakeholder process, the process itself is what truly shines. And so when you bring differing perspectives to the table, one of two things happens. You find a divergent approach that you wouldn't have otherwise thought of had you not been here and exchanged ideas, or it further solidifies your original hypothesis, which gives you that peace of mind that you kind of went through all the machinations and that your final outcome is in fact the right path forward. So either way, the ball has been moved further down the road, and that itself is progress. So again, thank you so much for coming out on this rainy, cold day, and I look forward to hearing the results of this meeting. So thank you, Alan, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Dan. And so just very briefly before we dive in, this is the last, we'll get on the network. For those of you who are watching the live stream, want you to be aware that the live stream is, despite the advances in internet technology, is a little bit behind a pure actual live stream. And so once we shift to the point where we're going to start engaging, and I'll remind you of this again, the voice call is going to be a little more live and in real time. So if the live stream lags on the web, maybe you just shift over to the voice so that you can participate and enjoy the conversation, and join the conversation with us. So before we get started, I want to underscore what Diane just said. This sometimes can be a messy process. We like it because we think this is one of the most agile and adaptive ways to identify good consensus outcomes that meet all of our needs. The government doesn't say, hey, we should do this. In this case, we're coming to you and say, we think this is an important problem. Let's talk about how we can address it together. This sometimes takes a little more time. Sometimes we have to go around and around before we realize, oh, right, that thing that she said at the beginning, that's where we should end up. But the journey and walking through all the other ideas helps us get us there. And it's the hard work and showing up and having these weekly calls that you guys have been on. That's what gets us there a little faster. So thank you again for all of your hard work.